Starship Hector. This is the ultimate challenge to your battle skills. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Starship Sean.
And I'm just Joe.
In the star year of 2038, the Fourth World War on Earth destroyed all of mankind. The Starship Hector, which was thousands of light years away on an exploration mission, did something. Is that really what the back of the box says? Oh, it was thousands of light years away. Sorry, I'm butchering it.
What are you doing?
I'm reading the back of the plot on the back of the box, but like it felt like it was like an incorrect sentence. But now I realize that it's
light
saying,
years are a measurement of distance.
No, yeah, just that like I'm realizing that that's the explanation for like why the Starship Hector wasn't destroyed as part of all mankind. Let me read the sentence again. You tell me if it's. I think it's just worded a little bit
you
strange.
finished the sentence the first time.
Right, but this is the sentence. This is the sentence.
This is part of it right now?
No. In the star year of 2038, the Fourth World War on Earth destroyed all of mankind, period. The Starship Hector was thousands of light years away on an exploration mission. Now it sounds better, right? Like, they're explaining why the Starship Hector survived when the rest of mankind was destroyed.
Is star year just another way to say year? Because that sounds like a normal year. And I feel like it's not going to be another 2,000 years until World War III. You know, like just being honest.
It is a little strange because it all takes place on Earth, so we don't say we live in the star year of 2024.
Well,
I'm
maybe
start saying that
they need a standardized system because they can't measure it by like how long it takes Earth to go around the sun if we're talking about the whole universe.
Well, then they should have used. There's already a standardized like star date system used in Star Trek, and they didn't do that.
Maybe it's a good way of getting around like once that date passes. Like 2038 was pretty far away in 1990, but we're getting close to that now.
Yeah.
And so once you get to 2039, it's like, no, we were talking about the star year 2038, like not our 2038. Anyway,
crutch.
Yep, Starship Hector, thousands of light years away, has now returned, but not to the Earth that is destroyed. Because they traveled via light years or something, they're now back to ancient Earth.
Via light years?
I don't know. Like, they didn't explain how they went back, so it's like,
light
what
speed, you mean? Light speed?
But what's the explanation? Like this? Okay,
there is no explanation.
Yeah. Anyway, now it's ancient Earth, so they went so far away that they came back to a different time period. And
didn't that happen in like Planet of the Apes or something? The modern one?
No, but that's a bit of a spoiler, Joe. Jeez.
Sorry, everybody.
No, it's a spoiler for like a how old movie now?
I
think it's also wrong.
I shouldn't have broken that.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's mostly wrong. There's like a hint of truth to what Joe said.
If you don't want to be spoiled, don't listen to the last 30 seconds of this podcast.
The 30 seconds that we already talked about.
The previous 30 seconds. Don't have listeners to that.
Anyway, so it's ancient Earth, so you would expect that like the Starship Hector is like the most advanced thing. However, this ancient Earth is inhabited by gruesome biomechanical creatures. So Starship Hector must fight its way past the many different biomechanical empires to save Earth's future. So it's also like a little Back to the Future thing where they've gone so far away that they return to the past and now they have to get back to the future, but by doing some things correctly in the past. Do we even have to unpack like
no,
it's all in the back of the box, but no, I'm saying like do we have to unpack what happened to is the Fourth World War against these biomechanical things that were like once the main inhabitants of Earth but then like went underground? Is this some like 2005 Tom Cruise War of the World stuff?
Oh, see,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, having not read the manual or the back of the box, during your description, where I was thinking it was going was that there was a war against some sort of alien or other form of life other than human, and by the time Starship Hector came back, it was like, oh, they'd already started a new civilization over that just seems to mirror ours. But that was just contextually me piecing together some bullshit that like.
No, but that bullshit is better than I think whatever story's happening because it makes no sense in terms of timelines, and it's kind of a ripoff of Battlestar Galactica down to the titling convention. And the ship just kind of looks like the Enterprise, and I never gave it a moment's thought. I just started playing shmup good or shmup bad.
Well, I'll be honest with you guys. It wasn't until I got to the Egyptian level, which I think is like the 4th or 5th stage, that I realized we were going through the stages of history. Like I don't know, I just didn't. It didn't. None of it dawned on me.
Big
like,
pyramid?
This is a historical period.
You just needed a pyramid to like sand it home for you.
But think of how many, because think of how many like times we've had moai heads or like pyramids in other games. So it's just like, oh, it's another space game with pyramids.
And turns out those biomechanical creatures made the pyramids.
I knew it.
All right, not moving into the game just yet. I guess this is tied to the game. It's the Starship Hector. So I guess Hector is like maybe the inventor of the ship or whatever, or
no, that's the ship's name.
Okay, yeah. So the ship gets a human name instead of something cool like the USS Enterprise. But is that fine? Like, it's just a weird name, right? Like localized, it's weird.
It's very dumb. It's why I said the joke at the beginning that nobody laughed at, which I guess makes it even more funny that this is called Starship Hector.
The listeners all laughed. Guaranteed.
I hope they
this
did.
Podcast laughed.
Thank you, listeners that laughed.
And now we can officially get into the gameplay, which is that Starship Hector is a shmup. As Sean said, good shmup, bad shmup, we'll decide. I think he was talking about his gameplay skills, but we're talking about now the quality of the game. And Starship Hector is one of those shmups that doesn't stick to a theme. It has vertical and side-scrolling stages. Is it better to mix it up, like where you do A, B, A, B, or do you prefer just sticking to the same viewpoint when you're playing a shmup? And I know that sounds like an obvious answer, or at least when I worded it, I was like, well, I don't think there's going to be much discussion there. But the more I thought about it, I was like, I don't know, sometimes I don't like it when gameplay switches up so dramatically, especially in something as tight as a shmup where you kind of are relying on your mastery of the controls.
Yeah, I think it depends on the specific game and like how much love is going into each type of gameplay, because it can be very cool if it's like, okay, now you've got like great game design in one way, now you get to like experience a different way where you got to think about things differently. But also there, I feel like we've had games before where they've thrown in maybe not necessarily like shmup that has side scrolling and forward scrolling, but like where they've thrown in another form of gameplay where you're like, that kind of felt a little undercooked compared to the rest of the game. So it just depends on the execution, I think.
Yeah, I think as a trend, like this is getting kind of like rote now. Like there's been so many of these that like, oh, we're gonna switch it up every level or so, and I kind of equate it to nowadays every franchise with it's like a AAA is like, oh, now we've got like crafting mechanics. It's gonna make a whole new like. So it's kind of like that. Like, stop it. Just do the one thing good, please.
Because the Switch kind of requires players to not only adapt to the different control screens, but also the enemy behaviors, right? Like, the way enemies enter the screen changes, too. So you have to think... I don't know. It just, for me, it wasn't like, oh... I couldn't even put my finger on which one I prefer. It was just more like a reset every single level,
To me, like, it feels like, aside from, and we'll get into this, like, there's a secondary fire that is like a ground attack button, basically. And aside from that, moving from, you're just kind of shooting two layers of things to now you're shooting as you normally would in a shmup, and also down towards the ground. Now you can actually see that Z-axis. Aside from that visual change, it plays exactly the same. Like, it really is just kind of a gimmick.
But I will say, though, that based, going off of what you just said about the that visual change of the bombs you're dropping or whatever those are, the lower torpedoes that you're dropping, I think that is a case where it's they may, even though like the first thing you play is the overhead view, it feels like that is less developed, and maybe that's just by nature of like the lack of a z-axis there, or at least going downward, because it is not intuitive half the time what you're shooting at. Like if you're shooting at something on the ground or something in the air, where, I mean, I'm sure you look at a screenshot of this, you could probably pretty easily tell what's ground and what's in the air, but everything's happening so fast, everything's coming at you so fast, it's your brain doesn't work that fast half the time. So it felt like I needed something else to make those more apparently different. And then in the side-scrolling, of course, you can just see, okay, that's below me, I'm going to shoot below me. This is in front of me, I'm going to shoot in front of me. But the other one, it's like you can't really tell. Am I shooting low or am I shooting high for this? Am I hitting this thing? There's a little bit of trial and error sometimes.
I think the biggest thing for me, I think it's just more psychological, because I kind of agree, but I think the actual reason is just that the side-scrolling stages are just prettier to look at. Like there's some actual art there, whereas in the moving forward vertically scrolling, it all just kind of looks like Commando, but with some other stuff thrown in. Yeah.
Right.
Sean, you mentioned the two ways to attack, using either the ammunition or the bombs. That's it for the entire game. Usually we get into a section on our Shmup podcast, which have become rather formulaic, where we talk about the power-ups and how the power-ups are different. But there are no power-ups. You cannot upgrade the ship in any way. And, that's tough. In the breadth of all of the shmups that we've played, like that's a tough thing to receive now.
Yeah, the only thing that this game has to offer mechanically that's any different than anything we've played before is this game. One, it has a health bar. Not the first time it's been done, but that needs to be stated to describe the one thing that is new, and that is Pez dispensers across the area of the map that act as like little health dispensers. You shoot them, they give you a little poop of health, and you eat it up, and you get a little bit of health, and it doesn't really make a difference because everything kind of takes huge chunks of your health away. But that's the one thing, little dispensers.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, the life meter is nice because now there's no one-hit KOs, which are probably the most frustrating part of any shmup, is like just when you were getting good, you get accidentally hit by one thing and you lose all your power-ups, and you either, whether you start back in the same exact place or start at the beginning of the level, it just sucks to lose all that progress when it's designed for it. At least in this case, when you die, it's just like, oh, well, I was only ever supposed to have the gun and the bomb, so it's not like I lost any progress. I just need to make sure I don't lose all my health. But why can't we just... Why is it that we can't have both, right? Like, games with shmups can have power-ups and a life meter and probably work just fine. Heck, I bet there's more than a handful of examples post-NES, but we seem to struggle with the balance here of, like, would this game have been too freaking easy if it had a health bar and had like a spread mechanic and like heat-seeking missiles and stuff? I don't know. That's hard to say, but it is frustrating that like such a great feature, such a much necessary feature for people who aren't great at these old school shmups, something like a health bar, is then like hindered by other features that are standard in NES shmups missing.
Yeah, I think I've said this before on other shmup episodes. I'm not fundamentally opposed to the idea of no power-ups in a shmup. I think that can be fun because it can be like twitch reflexes and stuff. It's just the way that the vehicle controls has to sort of lend itself to that, and I feel like in this case it doesn't. Like I was desperately the whole time needing a speed or maneuverability power-up. And like I did feel like there were times in this where it's like, yeah, no matter how skilled I am with the tools I have at my disposal, like it's going to be pretty hard for me to not die at this point, So like I think that this game particularly needs it for those reasons, because I mean, the main reason being that you move so slow and the screen is so saturated with projectiles. Like I feel like this might be one of the slower moving vehicles in a shmup that we've had in a long time, at least. And that does not go well with like you being underpowered.
I think that if you're going to make the decision to not do power-ups, like you have to actually, you kind of have to revolutionize shmups. Like you have to do something so fundamentally different that it lends itself to just like, oh, focus on this action. Because if you're not going to do that and you're just going to kind of create a template shmup, as I used to say, that's the only lever you have to pull, is like what kind of cool actual power-ups am I going to give the player. I guess like, yeah, the art is always a plus, but like in terms of gameplay, that's it. And they kind of shot themselves in the foot here by not doing anything with it.
Well, they did add one other thing that we're glossing over. Probably the reason that the spaceship is named Hector, and that is because throughout the
pilot's
levels,
name is Hector.
No, you get the ability to collect the letters that spell out Hector. You can collect the H-E-C-T-O and R hidden exclusively in the vertical levels. I don't know why they couldn't be in the side-scrolling ones. It wouldn't have been hard. The tiles would just, it's not like, oh, well, I don't know how to, because of the way the tiles are shown vertically, I don't know how to do that.
You'd have to rotate the tiles.
Right, exactly. It doesn't make any sense. So in the vertical levels, these are hidden. You blow up area. I think they're only with the bombs. I think you have to purposefully destroy destructible things in order to reveal them. And then when you in order to get all those letters to spell out Hector, that must be why the game is called Starship Hector. They had the letters in first, and then they built the game around it.
Yeah, because all they had to do to make it at least sound cool. It would still sound generic, but if you just change it to the H to a V, now it sounds like a spaceship name, and not the guy down the street.
Spelling out Hector should have given you something like, we played a game like this on the Nostalgia Bites podcast, like early on. But like once you spell out Hector, your starship turns into like a Gundam style, like humanoid.
Oh, yeah.
And then, that's what it should have done.
That's Hector, yeah.
Yeah. I think that game was called Exerion, the one we
Sounds
played on
made up
Bites.
enough to be true.
Yeah. See, it's bad when even I can't remember them, but we got in our stride with the Bites episodes. For those of you that don't know, Nostalgia Bites is something we do on patreon.com/nostalgia. They're the Famicom games, and I'm looking into it, and it doesn't look like it was Exerion. So I think it was Formation Z then by process of elimination.
That was a Bites game?
It was a Bites game.
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe I'm making all of it up. Maybe that was just shameless self-promotion.
Can we hire a podcast historian to just keep our shit straight?
Aren't we the podcast historians?
I don't have time to be that. I'm playing the games.
It was Formation Z. Okay, so at least we can feel good about that.
Could the podcast historian label each part of each era like History 1, History 2, History 3?
Why do they do that? Why do they do that, Joe?
I don't know. Like, is that what we called it, like colloquially? Like, oh man, what's your thoughts on like History 4? You're talking like ancient Egypt, that's History 4.
I could understand if it was even like, because you're traveling. I mean, I thought it was all happening at the same time and you were just going from civilization to civilization. But if you were like slowly traveling through history, just like referring to them as the centuries or whatever, but like History 1, History 2 did feel strange for like naming the stages. Because
it feels like it's like a high school class. Like...
Right, just name them like Egypt, right? Like Rome. It's like, just do it.
Just do it.
We are not sponsored by Nike.
Thank you for that, John. That's important. The actual coolest part of the game, though, with one unfortunate fatal exploit, are the bosses. I gotta say, if any of the time spent on development was well spent, it had to be on the bosses because they're all not only cool looking, but they offer the kind of attack patterns and variety that you want from a shmup boss. And so I enjoyed seeing all of these bosses, and I enjoyed the fights themselves, but why are you able to actually deal damage to them before the fight begins?
Wait, you can?
You can, as long as you are as long as they are on screen, right? They wait for the whole screen to fully appear before they start attacking. But if you can see them, just go right up to them and shoot them in their weak point, and it will count as damage hit. And if you watch some of the speed runs of this game, I guess you can call them, that's the strategy, because some of them the fight will end before the boss starts fighting.
Well, that sounds like a mistake.
Has to be a mistake, but they left it in the game, and therefore it makes what I'm saying is the coolest feature something that requires some restraint, because for instance, the what was it? That it's like a giant face in one of the vertical levels.
Yeah.
And that's a cool fight, but if you can just destroy it before it really takes off, then you don't even need why bother with it?
Yeah, I wonder though how much you need to know what's coming in order to really exploit that, because I was always shooting, but and granted, I only got to History 3 because I do think the rest of this game outside of the bosses is incredibly difficult. But
yes.
But the bosses that I got to, I wouldn't have known where their weak spots were until it was probably a little too late for me to use that exploit, unless I had, already been familiar with it.
Correct. Yeah, that's a good point. And Joe, what made the game so difficult for you?
Well, for me, it was, and this happens in a lot of shmups, but it was so oversaturated, especially by the third history. By the third history, you are sometimes you're going in small, narrow areas. There's projectiles everywhere. There are ships that just fly right into you that kill you in one hit, no matter how much health you have, which is bullshit if you're gonna have a health bar.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's, so much of that happening, and you, like I said earlier, you move so slow. It's really hard to dodge sometimes. And I'm sure that someone who's a master at this game would laugh at me, but I swear that there's times where I die and I'm going over in my head. I'm I don't think there was a way I could have gotten out of that. Obviously there probably was, but I feel like I was trapped so often and died from I needed to be frame perfect if I didn't want to die.
Sean, you agree with that assessment, or was there something else troubling you?
No, I'd say that was it. It was a combination of density of projectiles, the fact that your health bar doesn't matter if you make contact with a wall. I feel like that's something that we kind of didn't see for a while. You can kind of you could rub up against a wall, you just couldn't move any further. But now if you lightly touch a wall, you will just explode, which is odd considering how slow you move. Just the same complaints.
Yeah, I would say too, especially in the later levels, it's surprising that there's so many enemies on the screen at once. I think they thought that was the way to up the challenge without necessarily testing how those enemies shoot, because the way that they shoot, very few enemies shoot at you head on, right? Just they shoot straight down and you just have to line up with them and dodge their shot and shoot their shot. Most of these enemies shoot diagonally in whatever which way they feel like. So you wind up getting too many enemies of that, and then it's an entire zone of the screen has been cornered off for you. And if you just happen to be unluckily in that area when those enemies come in, you might just be in the line of fire with no way out, which is unfortunate, because it's easier, and this is true of a lot of video games, it's easier when watching somebody who is beating the game, watching a playthrough after the fact and seeing what needs to be done. But when you're in control, there are sometimes it's not even a matter of reflexes, it's just a matter of unfamiliarity with what's happening as it's occurring to you, that it's bound to happen. And so I think that's, even though you have the life bar is absolutely necessary, because if we were dealing with one-hit KOs, this game would be even more frustrating.
And you can't you wouldn't even have to, thankfully, like depend on your reflexes, because once it gets to that point, the slowdown is insane.
Oh yeah.
So you just get to watch yourself in an unwinnable situation in slow motion.
That's just a side effect of going back to ancient Earth when you're from the future.
True. Isn't this a 1987 game, Mike?
It is, because
it's a star year, 1987.
This game was developed by Hudson Soft in star year 1987. And Sean, I don't know if you know that, because in Japan,
main screen.
Okay, in Japan, the game is not called Starship Hector. It's just called Hector 87.
Ah, okay. You gotta keep the Hector.
Hector was important. Starship was like, a little too nerdy. Like kids don't really like starships.
That Nintendo of America was like just pleading with them, like, please let us like make them think that it's actually like a space game and not about some guy named Hector.
But you know what though? We laugh about it, but before Mario was synonymous with like a Nintendo mascot, it was just a plain, boring Italian name.
Yeah, but
so maybe they were shooting their shot and hoping that like Hector would be like the spaceship equivalent of the.
Yeah, Mario isn't a sailboat though.
That's a fair point.
Allegedly, this game is a spin-off of the Star Soldier series. Do you remember Star Soldier? We played that game. I feel silly even asking if you guys remember that.
Yeah, come on. You know we don't remember that.
Okay, well, here's how it works, okay? Star Soldier was a sequel to Star Force, another game we played. So we played Star Force, Star Soldier, and now the spin-off Starship Hector. But the weird thing is that I really can't, other than the developers being the same, I can't figure out how this is a spin-off. Like, is this just one of those things that, like, somebody wrote on Wikipedia and then it gets regurgitated all over the place? Because there's no lore in common as far as I know. And in Star Soldier, there were power-ups. So that was like, this is a downgrade now, no power-ups. And also there were...
You move a lot faster.
Yeah, sure.
A lot faster. I'm watching the video right now. I have no memory of it.
Star Soldier also had these like trap zones where you can go into the background, and that, again, another really cool feature. But we don't have any of that in Starship Hector. And is every game that has Star in the title just a spin-off of Star Soldier? Is that how this works? I don't know. Like, you wouldn't say Zelda games are a spin-off of Super Mario Brothers.
It sounds like
the same
marketing
people made
gimmick.
Them.
Yeah. It just like to associate it with something that they thought was successful, because I guarantee you that when they were first designing the game, that I was like, yeah, we have to make this a spiritual successor to this other very generic game that we made. So, yeah.
Well, even our podcast is full of marketing gimmicks, because the hook of our show is what we do at the end of every episode, and we're going to do it again here with the Essential Games List.
It'd be funny if we didn't this time.
So let's not.
All right.
No, we're going to do it. And I'm going to come right in and tell you guys, it's a no for me, and I do wonder how much of just like, because I have on my list of notes here, the only thing in bold is no power-ups, and I wonder how much of like, not that was like the nail in the coffin for the game, but that was what made it not even a starting point. Like, it was like, I just don't think like it's not going to be interesting enough, and I kind of went in with that bias, and I played it, and I was like, yeah, it's really not going to be interesting enough. I like the bosses. I kind of like traveling. The locations are unique, and they managed to feel a little different because the enemies do change up. In fact, in the manual, there's this nice splash page of just like all the different enemies and all the different places you'll go and all the different bosses you'll see. And I like that. It shows that there's variety to this game, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of variety while I was playing. And so for me, it's a no. What about you, Sean?
I've pretty much made my opinion clear already. Sorry about that. It is not essential.
Joe?
I'll say something nice about it first. I do think that the sprite work is pretty beautiful in this game. I know there's like the bosses, but also some of the backgrounds, and and there's like flame pillars. It gave me very Super Nintendo vibes. Like that's the shining star of this game, in my opinion. Is like it It's well designed.
The fire pillars.
Visually. The stars. But then, I mean, I won't even say anything bad. I don't have much else to say about it. Like, I'm like Don Drapering it. Like, I don't think about you at all, kind of. Like, it was just boring. I'm going to forget about it. So, not essential and not good.
Alrighty, and that has been another episode of Nostalgia Shmups. I'm sure we'll get one pretty soon because that's just how they work. Do you think The Adventures of Gilligan Island is a shmup? Gilligan Island. I think Gilligan's Island.
I think
I'm
Wall
dropping
Street
my
Kid
S's a lot today. I don't know what that's about. I'm a little concerned.
Me think Wall Street Kid is a shmup is what Joe is going to say.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because that's next week's game, so thank you for that, Joe. At least one person on this show sounds coherent.
I mean, sometimes.
Good hello.